Hello, America and the world. I don't know. This is the sixth
Yeah, America and the world.
Yeah. America's obviously better. As anarchists, we love America. Hate the rest of the world, obviously. That is a lie. It is the sixth episode of Lucy and Corey's
Off to a great
Wow.
start.
We're always off to a great start. They're wearing a Joan Jett shirt in Florida.
Oh yeah.
Yep,
Corey. That's true. Also true.
Here
and there, Lucy wearing a plain black shirt.
No, I'm wearing a depressing anti-drone shirt. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can't really tell.
They're in Philadelphia, right?
Oh my god. Okay.
Oh, sorry. For
like 4 years, Corey thought listeners. I lived in Philadelphia.
No, it's not exactly true. It's just I would sort of think you were around Philadelphia at least, like in the general vicinity of Philadelphia, because that's where we.
Once we were there at the same time. It's true.
That's true. It wasn't even where we met. It was just one time we were there at the same time. I was thinking, no, we met in D.C. So if anything, I should think you live in D.C. And you live even farther from D.C.
You also live in D.C. apparently, because I met you there.
Yeah, we both live in D.C.
No, we shouldn't, because D.C. is terrible.
I would not want to live in D.C. I would not want to live there.
Do not recommend. 1 out of
how long did you live there?
100 stars. More like 15 months.
Why? For like an internship or something?
For Reason.
like when you worked at Reason?
Yeah.
Oh.
Reason.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Feels like a while ago. I think I forgot.
Yeah, no.
I can't believe I'm podcasting with an ex-reasoner.
Yes, that is terrific.
All the reason in this podcast is definitely on my side. In other words.
Well, as a man, you have reason and cold, rational thought, and
That's true. I'm capable of emotion.
Yeah, everyone knows anger and other male-coded emotions are not emotions, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'm not too worried. Wow. Speaking of anger, maybe we should get into like the big topic of late.
Which depressing big topic have we decided to cover, Corey?
I think the shortage of cotton candy is the big one that we should discuss. Everyone knows that it's big, and that they're probably expecting our thoughts on it.
That's very true.
And I say, you know what I think? I think most people are wrong, and I think they should just make more cotton candy. I know that's kind of a controversial view.
Cotton candy,
but that would be the solution to the shortage. I think to make more.
Sounds like a free market talk to me. So I don't know if that's valid.
Free cotton candy.
Your sound is terrible. Are you wearing headphones?
Yeah.
Are you wearing headphones?
But to be honest, your sound and audio and the image seems bad from my end too.
Huh.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Why is my sound terrible? Can you not understand what I'm saying?
No, I can. It was just like there was like a weird, mysterious sound, like some kind of evil was growing.
It could be an evil. It could be an evil under the table, maybe. I don't know. If the sound is bad, we can totally excise the important cotton candy discussion. That could be deleted.
But the people would lose that.
The people would riot.
Yeah. Are all of
in America and abroad.
Podcast talk made me really hungry. Now we're thinking about cotton candy. So.
Yeah, I say we keep all this. There should be the curtain should be down. Oz, is a myth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like to imagine that the people aware of us hold us in great awe as if we're, wizards, I guess, of some kind.
God, this is the worst podcast in the world.
I know.
No, I'm just kidding. But we have great banter. Let's talk about Israel. Let's talk about Palestine. Those are things in the world. Have you heard of those things?
Yes.
Me too. I hear things. I
Wow.
don't want to hear 99% of the discourse about these things, but
Good
I
news.
do.
That was totally my fault in the past several minutes.
What was your fault? Israel Palestine?
No.
Oh,
Um,
thank God. I was going to say I'm podcasting with an ex-reasoner and the cause of Israel Palestine conflict.
to be fair, if it was my fault, perhaps then I could fix it, and that would be pretty handy.
Yeah, you just need to apologize. Will you do that? Will you make a public apology, Lucy,
I will.
and
And
and and, and remedy this
I like to think that if that's all it took, I would in fact do that. And
and bring about peace in our time? You can
yeah,
do it. No one's stopping you from, because even there's even a chance, like 1/100th of 1,000% chance that your public apology, you should do it for the risk reward ratio.
yeah,
No downside, huge upside. The upside is huge.
that's true. I can't argue with that.
Yeah. Is there
So,
anything you can argue with about Israel Palestine?
well, not
I
with
don't know. I
that.
don't think we disagree too much on that. But
I would be
um,
very surprised. I mean,
well, we do have a collective lamentation, I think, at
that
the
sounds
whole
about
the whole discourse surrounding it.
right. And it's almost easier to be annoyed by the discourse than the actual facts of it, but you know, the
Oh well,
discourse.
that's just it's the perspective of outsiders is kind of then reduced to that. But yeah,
Yeah.
obviously,
Have you noticed that some people who seemed kind of reasonable get real spooky when it comes to talking about this conflict?
well, it's that
Um,
time of the year to be spooky, I guess. But
I wasn't
um,
looking for that
it
kind of
is
spooky, but yes, indeed it
it
is.
is weird. It is weird. It is weird. Some people I really greatly agree with and even respect and admire. Oftentimes, I find myself, having these strong disagreements whenever this topic rears its head, whenever uh, you know issues surrounding it start to flare up, and it's frustrating and in some ways disorienting. Um, Maybe that's a product of just being inundated with so many views with social media, but yeah, hard to make sense of, hard to feel uh, complacent about too. Um, and then it feels like very Sisyphusian, because then it's like every time it comes back in the news cycle, then you have the same arguments with those same people or something.
My thing is, so I saw it, not clarifying for my own sake, not because it's mandatory, but I am not a fan of Hamas or any group that, for one thing, provokes violence against their people, unilaterally
Yeah,
deciding something and doing it on purpose, even for their political goals. Not just other innocent people, but their own people. And it's not like they took a vote or something, as if that would matter. But
yeah,
last night I saw a particular tweet that was, blaming, saying every single thing that happens is on Hamas. Like it's their fault. And even if everything about that tweet was true, it wouldn't change the fact that something is wrong with punishing large swaths of people. It's like
yeah,
it's abuser talk. Like, you made me do this, and that's all I care about. Is
yeah,
like, you made us commit this violence, and all philosophical, ethical quandaries stop because it's your fault. Like a child. It's
yeah.
very strange.
Yeah, it's strange how that philosophy comes. Like it's hard to, in war, in the context of war, it's hard to conduct or think just any part of war. I feel like without some line of thought, like that, um, in terms of this, you know, uh, denial of agency in some ways for when it's convenient for one of the parties,
That's
um,
true. Yeah.
and responsibility then for their actions, and any innocents killed, and then it licenses violence on both sides.
Mhm. I mean, I guess that also people use that in certain, I don't know, like criminal justice, police contexts, where again, I don't know, like if you think Waco was swell and it was 100% David Koresh's fault or whatever, David Koresh being a child molesting cult leader, that part is true. Even if
Yeah,
it was 100% his fault and somehow not the federal government's fault whatsoever, which is not true, the end result
Yeah.
was still 20 children dying, and some other people who
Yeah.
maybe would have shook off the whole cult thing and had better lives after that. I mean, like, what is the
Yeah.
blame obsession? It's so fucking childish.
Yeah.
We can talk about blame, but it's not the number one concern. But apparently it is for these people, and it's disturbing.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. It kind of reminds me of a point um, that Brian Kaplan makes. Who uh, I don't always agree with, especially as of late, but still has always made great arguments in in this context of war. Um, and he makes the case, the argument that even if a lot of these casualties of war were necessary or in some way causally related to some greater end or some worthwhile goal um, outside of that, even if that was the case, even if you grant that, it's bizarre and repugnant that the way people who view those things as necessary or worthwhile still approach it with insufficient regret. And like
Hmm.
you said, it's this. Well, I have nothing to even feel bad about, and there's nothing to even feel bad about. However many children died in this case, in that case, but it's all the fault of this other party, and so I don't have anything to feel regretful about. And he talks about how kind of warped that view is. Like, even if I thought that there was some calculus that deemed it worthwhile, uh, it would be one of like mourning and sorrow to have to believe that view and act it out in the world and defend it. Uh, that seems like the proper or appropriate emotional um, set of emotions to go with those views, even if you think they're true. And they so often don't. There's uh, a real bloodthirstiness and retributiveness, and they deserved it sort of um, vibe to a lot of it, and it sucks.
I mean, even if, you killed somebody in the most obvious, clear cut self defense one on one situation, we would assume
Yeah,
that you should feel not great about having to do it. We would find that very disturbing. Or if you have to kill a rabid dog, like, there's nothing to celebrate here. Or even to be like, well, it had to be done, so I have no emotions about it. I mean, the
yeah,
sort of political single tier regret is also not great, because I think, I don't know, somebody like Barack Obama probably thought it was a real solemn duty to, you know, bomb drone lots of weddings and stuff. And when people died, well, darn it, it's just my job as president. And that's not, ethically satisfactory either. But for somebody who's a complete outsider who has nothing to lose by being
yeah,
concerned
yeah.
about the
Concerned
ethics and the bloodshed, you lose
and the
nothing by
loss.
being like, "Oh my god." But instead you turn fully to, well, it's all Hamas's fault, so I have nothing else. That's all I have.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very strange.
I agree. Even in the political context, it strikes me more as a complacency or a kind of apathy about it than any genuine sorrow or regret. Hard for me to see it as that kind of this banality to those
Mhm.
deaths. I feel like from the perspective of the political agents. But I also have two thoughts on what you just said. The first is that I agree that the similar emotions are sorrow and regret and guilt and maybe some guilt are appropriate when um, in the case of putting down a rabid dog. But then I would just hesitate to on the flip side analogize that too far with the human experience, because I think
Oh,
that ends up
sure.
being a denial of agency as well. So I wasn't sure. I think that ends up being in a
I was
weird way
really trying
disrespectful.
to find an example where to kill something was
Yes.
unimpeachably the right idea, and even then you shouldn't be delighted by that.
Right. Okay.
I
Yes,
realize
and I
that
agree.
people compare certain groups sometimes in that way, and that is not at
Oh,
all.
I didn't really mean. Oh no, I don't. I know you didn't mean that. I was just sort of. It almost reminds me of like the Joker or something, right? Like this, this as if a person could be a rabid dog, or like
Mhm.
not have agency if even if they're committing wrong acts. But
I mean, then we can take a 50-year tangent about the brain and certain things if it's actually
yeah,
your fault and that sort of thing. There's
oh
always
sure,
like
sure,
lifetime tangents worth of things that are available,
yeah.
but I don't know.
And my other thought was just I'm kind of reminded of kind of a sad situation because you bring up the exact context, which is even in appropriate self defense, even in necessary and maybe even proportional, true, just self defense. Uh, it seems odd to not have any uh, sorrow in that situation, and it reminds me of just kind of a famous situation that this really applies to, and which is Scott Hall, who recently passed away. He was a pro wrestler,
Mm,
and he kind of uh, when he was working at like a bar as like a bouncer back in like the 80s, I guess. He was attacked outside in the parking lot, and a guy was on top of him and going at him, and his life, easily was in danger. And he, with his back to the pavement, getting beat up and pummeled, he pulled out his gun and shot the guy point blank
mm,
in self defense. Uh, and he never, and so he was okay legally, right, self defense, but he was never, as far as I understand, okay psychologically and mentally and spiritually, I guess, because it was also bound up in his religious views. Uh,
yeah.
I've heard that he, for the rest of his life, for the next 30+ years, he felt such immense guilt at that situation, and the fact that he killed someone, he took away someone's life, he shot someone point blank, and it almost seems really hard to reconcile that with the fact that you kind of you had to, and it was just, and I can't imagine. And my understanding is he drove himself crazy with that guilt, and he had problems with alcoholism and a lot of things. And I think he was convinced he was going to hell or facing some sort of religious related punishment, ultimately, because he violated such a key, seeming moral rule or commandment, to not kill or not take a life.
Well,
And
again,
obviously that's not good.
no,
Oh,
yeah, I was gonna say that's not a good thing, but it speaks
oh
to
no, no! He tormented himself and tortured himself with that. I'm saying it's all the way to the other side of this issue, to where then you can go too far with that or something, but yeah, it's no, no, it's a real shame, um, and it's I guess it's a shame the way our emotions fail us with these situations.
yeah. I mean, I think of war and PTSD as well, and you can again get into overly detailed question of the ethics when you are in the situation of war and you have a gun and they have a gun and um I mean, I don't know, but people having PTSD from that speaks well of humans because we do not tend to enjoy that experience. There is a minority who have brain problems that are probably not their fault either, again, which is another whole kettle of fish. But most people do not do well with war. It hurts us. It damages us
Yeah,
to hurt other people a lot of the time. I mean, how many people who abuse other people were abused? A lot of them. It's not
yeah.
everything. Everything's not excused. It's not every perpetrator was a victim once, but it seems like a lot of them were. So I don't think we like doing violence very much, mostly, in spite of the fact that it occurs more than we'd like. So yay for humans with an asterisk, I think, for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree, and I think that's why we come up with these rationales, like you were initially talking about, with excising our own agency and our own guilt, in order to reconcile oneself to the violence and to sleep at night. I guess, if you want to say that, but
I mean, okay, so, but also less philosophically, can I just, I mean, we don't need to get like super specific about Israel and Palestine in a way. In a way, I don't know enough. I know that the Palestinians are ill-treated, but I also know that what they call terrorism is not good for moral and practical reasons, as far as I'm concerned. It
Yeah,
doesn't work. It causes casualties on your side, and it's
yeah.
not a good thing. Um,
No,
but
the Hamas government is terrible for the people of Gaza. Terrible. It's one of the most terrible governments.
yeah, I mean, even before Hamas, any kind of like a suicide bombing back in the early aughts, anything like that, it's not. You can sort of empathize with desperation of a population that's not being treated fairly, while still saying that that's
Yeah,
not even an option, nor should
yeah.
it
You
be.
have to do both. I think you have to do both sides of that.
Because you have to ask why people do anything, why they would bother.
Yeah.
Now,
Why would people bomb entire areas in order to kill perceived just a few perceived enemies? Well, both sides have the same question.
but again, no matter how many, how much you talk it out, you and anyone can't talk away the fact that almost half the people in Gaza are children. And
Yeah.
there is no circumstance, there is no mitigating circumstance to hurt those people. There's nothing that you can do to talk that into being acceptable if you had your whole life to rhetorically twist it. And
But that won't prevent people from doing so, trying so, as we've seen.
but the people who I think know better, they just sort of don't step on that, or they say, well, it's Hamas's fault. I'm like, well, okay, maybe it is. That's not what I said. I said, I mean, like,
Yeah.
you can't do that. It's a cheat, But it's like when it happens, if you bring up with somebody who loves the death penalty someone who is obviously innocent, and they say, well, what about this complete sadist who definitely did it? Well, okay, but what about the guy who was innocent? You can't address it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of issues where you can't address directly. Immigration restrictions actually harm American citizens. Pretending for a second that I care about American citizens more than anyone else. They don't talk about that.
Right.
All of the consequences of anti-abortion laws, can't talk about that. It's just.
Well, that's the only way to rationalize, I think, certain things, right? To have a sort of selective focus, and we've seen just that with Gaza, and it's absurd. I think a lot of people almost don't know details like that. That half the people there are children, and
People are
so
repeating it, and it's still not
um,
kind of working on certain people who.
well, there's an obstinance, obviously, to facts, but um, I guess I just worry that because I think when you look at public polls, it seems like, unfortunately, resound like one-sidedness with support for Israel.
In
Um,
America or in.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that I've seen recently, and it seems like PR wise, the initial um, attacks and mass murders by Hamas that prompted this round of um, even though it's
Could have told you
selective
that,
to
Paul.
focus, even though it's selective to focus the story there.
Yeah.
But that's where the new series of events, the new cycle kicked off, and that's the thing I think that imprinted on a lot of people, and the completely disproportionate and likewise murderous response, less so, being highlighted or emphasized. Um, and part of that I think involves a certain conception of Gaza and the people there, and one of the best ways to rationalize war and the bombings and the slaughtering of innocents is by this collective blame and collective guilt and collective punishment, and equating Hamas and the terrorist group and the government with the entire people of Gaza, or even Palestine, and then and so saying there's just wash your hands of it. Um, And I
I mean,
think that I hope most people don't know that, like, half the kids there or half the people there are kids, and none of those kids had any say um, in bringing about Hamas and bring Hamas to power, um, even though our politicians act like it.
I, there's just, it's like they don't accept that you can't kill people en masse, particularly children, as a punishment, because the world exists as it exists and people do that sort of thing all the time. So if you try to tell them this shouldn't be an option, it doesn't really compute either, you know? And okay, then what else?
Yeah, I think a lot of people. I think it's it's the human problem in a way to resign yourself to certain things in the world and a lot of the evil in the world, and then you end up, because of that resignation, kind of licensing or legitimizing or at least being complacent in regards to evil.
But I mean, I guess now I'm thinking like the difference between okay, anarchism and centrist real world like all that shit. Um, and if I'm saying okay, there's a principle here where you cannot kill children, uh, and okay, that's a principle, but they're ignoring the reality of those children. Like we know that they are children. We know that they have nothing to do with Hamas or any other. They have no power. That part is real. That is unimpeachable fact. And all I have on top of that is a principle that says you cannot punish those people. And what they have is a principle that says, yeah, but they ignore the reality of who those children are and their complete lack of blame in anything. And
Yeah,
now I'm mad about it.
yeah. There's an abstraction. I don't see how any of this could be rationalized, and anyone can sleep at night without these abstractions at play in our thought, and and it's debilitating, and it's easy to get caught up in abstractions. Um, but yeah,
I mean, it comes down to like the last time we talked about war, and we're thinking of late of Ukraine and Russia, where
yeah,
in a vague sense, Ukraine has a just cause in the sense that they are being invaded by a foreign army. Um, so when I 5 seconds ago, I was leaning towards pure pacifism, and then I started thinking about how I could talk myself into saying, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was not ethically permissible because if the Wehrmacht people were involved, which I think they were, and they were drafted, and it wasn't going to work, so all you're doing is and that's ridiculous. That's like I can't. But I could talk, try to talk into that attitude if I really thought violence in any larger than one person scale was never permissible. So at some point there's a line somewhere, but it doesn't involve bombing civilian populations, period. I don't like
yeah,
Ukraine managing to hit Russia. Also, humans have been pretending that their bombs are more accurate since World War II, if not before, and it's fucking
mm,
bullshit.
that's a good point.
There was a whole thing in World War II where the Norton bomb sight, oh, we always hit wherever, and it's not
Mm,
true. And we still
huh,
pretend that we always get our man, we always hit the right. Oops, it was a wedding.
right. Yeah.
It just when it costs you nothing to be like, maybe this is bad. People who are not in any danger, people who are 4,000 miles away, and they still can't say, I am uncomfortable with the collective punishment being doled out. And they won't say it because
Right.
it's a team sport and it's.
Right. Yeah. I on pacifism, I mean that can mean a couple things. I know we talked about this before. I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but pacifism means no defense, no self defense. Then I couldn't be more against it.
Yeah.
I think the idea that I think I have a certain respect for the view. I think a lot of there's a lot of Christian explications of that view. Not surprising, which I think are often very interesting and very challenging and willing to be counterintuitive and I appreciate arguments like that. But ultimately, I find the idea that it's wrong to defend yourself repugnant,
Hmm.
and because by extension, it's wrong to defend others. It's not it's disrespectful to yourself to let yourself be subject to violence without defensively
But
fighting
defending
back.
others is now mutated into Gaza being bombed en masse. You're defending others. You're defending
Well,
your
the
Israeli countrymen because they were in fact attacked. Violence was committed against them, and so you're defending others, and that's what we've
well, they're
decided
saying.
does.
Well, I don't know if it's about defending, because they're also saying they're defending themselves. I'm defending Israel's defending itself by as if Israel was a person and Gaza was another
Right.
person.
States have no
But
right
but
to exist or defense.
but
By the way, no states.
but like I'm but the moral, I think, principles at play are obvious when looked at in a certain context, and they're not, like we said before, abstracted um, away in these geopolitical conflicts. I can defend myself from getting mugged. I can defend the old lady down the street from getting mugged. Um, and to think that that's wrong is to do a disservice to yourself and the old lady, and to let injustice happen. I just think it's a shame we have, I think, such a tendency to go further than defense and what's proportional and what's about restoring the conditions of nonviolence. We go further than that to retribution and to
Proportionality
punishment.
is a rare and treasured concept that we really aren't interested in. I mean, like a parody libertarian has a lawn covered in landmines, and if your neighbor chases a ball, like little kid chases a ball onto the property, you're allowed to shoot him because property rights are good, and that wouldn't be
It's
proportionality. That's a vaguely correct concept that would be an insane version of it. Like we have
yeah.
lost proportionality on lots of things, I think.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees in theory oh yeah, sure, violence should be defensive. It sure should be proportional. It's just that in practice, then there's so much divergence, and I think and abstraction at play, and unfortunately, rights and defense and justice and all that good stuff means nothing without proportionality, and it's not talked about enough. It's not theorized enough, especially for people whose political ideologies and worldviews are centered on rights and justice and defensive violence alone. Without them, proportionality means nothing. What do you do when rights have been violated? You can give me a theory all day long about what rights are and why people shouldn't violate them. That's fantastic. It's never going to be the case that then rights aren't violated in the real world. The whole reason we need to figure them out and what they are and why is because they get violated in the real world. But then what do we do there? What is the next step? And that's where proportionality and then other things like restitution and even reparations, and those are more complex discussions too, and how these ideas should be cashed out. But they're central to any libertarian conception of rights or any good conception of that stuff, I think. We ignore at our own peril. The idea that if you step on my toe, I can shoot you away is preposterous, and it goes and more often than not, our rights theory becomes useless in practice because we are not talking about what to do then,
Hmm.
and then
Or
we end up either implicitly or explicitly endorsing ridiculous stuff like you just mentioned.
we actually endorse revenge, even if we don't admit it, that revenge is part of, and that you can't do that once get morally and practically. Again, that is a terrible road to go down. Even if I
Well, yeah, so,
empathize with, your family gets killed by one group, and like I get, and I know it's easy for me to say, but revenge is not a good. It's not.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's the easiest thing to say at some at time A, but it's the hardest thing to say when it's relevant in some ways when you're emotionally caught up in something. It's if upon reflection we can't condemn revenge, then there's no point in further discussing anything. We're lost. We're completely lost as people. There's a reason so much good art for all time has been about the wrongness of revenge, the understandability of revenge, but then the other side of its utter wrongness and the utter need to ultimately reject it after initially being tempted by it, however understandably, to ultimately reject it.
And that goes back to my soft spot for pure pacifism and certain Christian tenets, and they can always be ruined. Like I had a soft spot for Christian forgiveness when it came to like there was some British dude whose book I read, who was on the Bataan Death March in World War II. He was forced to build a railroad. He was tortured
Mm.
by the Japanese, and years and years later, he found the translator who had been there for the torture sessions, and they reconciled. The translator had spent years becoming a Buddhist, building a temple in penance and stuff, and they just like sat down and were like, all right, let's all forgive each other. And that kind of thing, maybe there's nothing rational there, but it's incredibly moving, I think. But it's incredibly moving because you also recognize that it's difficult. It takes a certain
Yeah, it's
strength.
hard.
You would understand if someone didn't possess that. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but the more I've read recently about Duggar's style of fundamentalist Christianity, the more I see that even that beautiful forgiveness part is warped, because in those contexts you have to forgive the person. It's not a choice, especially if you're a young
right.
woman, someone powerless. The sort of beauty of it, like the strength, it's not there because you have to. Things are not fixed for you. You just have to forgive them, and it becomes very
Yeah,
twisted.
yeah,
Similarly, I believe during World War II, Gandhi had a whole thing where he was like, "You Jews should just lay down your lives in nonviolence," and
mm.
that was a big old blunder on his part. Because, yeah. But at the same token,
Yeah.
some of the good parts of Gandhi, if Gaza had a figure like that, of late, I feel like people have been pointing out that some of the really bad
It's
parts
interesting.
of Gandhi, there was some good
Right.
stuff there. And we, at some point, including a lot of leftists, have completely dismissed anything about nonviolence now. The kind of person who dips a toe into endorsing Hamas, or even kind of does, because any oppressed population can do anything to fight against their
Yeah.
oppressors. And then what are you doing then?
Yes. I
Then like nonviolence is totally just forget it. That doesn't work. We've decided.
yeah, I think it's a bit it's an extreme overreaction in a way is the line of thought to the things that you were saying, which is where the anti-revenge views or the pro-forgiveness views can go wrong and end up resigning ourselves to injustice and harm. And like I said earlier, I think they're in this. And if what pacifism and forgiveness means never defending yourself and others and never standing up to injustice defensively, proportionally, fairly, but still not because it's the flip mistake, I think, to not defend yourself and others to commit injustice, right? Like the flip mistake is to just let it happen. So I think they're both wrong in a way. Like you said, I think it's more in a weird sense, maybe more admirable just to go wrong in the direction that most people aren't capable of and don't to go wrong. And if you view the virtuous thing to do and somewhere in the middle of a spectrum and the two vices on the other sides, then like I think self-defensive violence is right in the virtuous part, but one vice is committing violence beyond defense, retributive or disproportional or vengeful, and then the other vice or mistake is just letting violence happen and forgiving it or licensing it, and that's also a mistake. Although
You're not
it's
at some
far
point.
less of us do that one.
At some point, you're not valuing human life either when you go
Exactly,
your full
that's
slug
what I
of
mean.
nonviolence.
Yeah, to truly value it. Yeah, and this is unfortunately what the defend people. These are the arguments that I think people take the truth from and then use to defend the disproportionate response. Oh, you can't let yourself get stepped on. You have to. You can't let injustice happen. And yes, you're right about that. But then you're just committing further injustice by bombing innocents. And they use those arguments to defend those actions as if that was just the justice or the restoration of justice or anything like that. And I think it's a shame that then the left wing has seen that and I think gone wrong in a completely different direction. I feel, when this topic comes back up, I expect to be let down by the right wing in a way, uh, for them to be unabashedly and pro whatever measures Israel takes in response, no matter how disproportionate and lethal. I expect the right wing to let me down mostly on that.
That's what it
I've been extremely frustrated to feel let down by the left wing in this new round of discussion because my because I'm closer to the left wing view in terms of viewing Israel quite negatively, the government,
Mhm.
but um, like you said, the now the left wing has gone wrong in the opposite direction, and there's entirely too much tolerance or downplaying of what Hamas did, of Hamas being bad,
Mhm.
including for Palestinians. That's the most deranged part of it all. That it's incredibly and unjust for the American leftists to downplay Hamas, because Hamas, in some ways, their greatest victims are the Palestinians they rule over. Um, the Palestinians are subject to both the injustice of Hamas and Israeli governments,
Mhm.
and we're just picking some other government there. That does makes no sense, because you oppose one to support the other. You should oppose both. And it's been incredibly frustrating to see leftists fail, I think, and let Israel gain, the government's responses gain more sympathy than, I think, because of the bizarre callousness and from the left.
Definitely. So everyone's terrible again, and we love them all. Value their humanity, and everyone's a disaster.
There's like some small contingent, of some leftists, some libertarians, like, a little bit overlaps of who, like, I feel like take the appropriately nuanced view on this. I mean, I guess I would say that about most any issue, but especially this one, where it feels like the nuanced view is so hard to come by, and in some ways it's understandable because it is so deeply complex, so historical. But also, nevertheless, I feel so alienated when, like we started with, people on either side of that, either leftists being bizarrely tolerant or even pro some of the Moss actions, and then of course the right wingers who pro or too tolerant or pro the Israeli disproportionate response. Um,
And I feel like I've been seeing a mixing of sort of Bush years flag waving conservatism with our fresh, horrible paleo conservatism, and there's kind of mixing around lately. But I'm also seeing like people like Glenn Greenwald, who thought Fox News, because it used to have Tucker Carlson and his paleo conservatism, that, well, they're obviously anti-intervention, and he's tweeting responses to Fox News people there now being sort of early Bush years, yay Israel, the Arabs, blah, and like
yeah.
he was like he forgot, like he couldn't remember that that's what those people are like in the end.
I think this almost caught a lot of us off guard. This issue coming back up, because it felt like you said, the Glenn Greenwalds and the way the alliances and dividing lines have sort of shifted, maybe, and reorganized the last 5-10 years. People were caught off guard by this issue, because it's like we forgot Islamophobia was like a hugely powerful force in the world and American politics.
Yep.
It was like that was central for like a long time, and then, I don't know, somehow like world events changed in such a way where it almost feels like we stopped talking about it for a long time, and then it's like, oh yeah, all these people are like motivated by like seemingly Islamophobia to take a side in the conflict. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up, which again is too large of a box of how much of this is purely racism or religious bigotry. Because again, if I start thinking about it, evangelicals support Israel for reasons that shouldn't be very flattering to Jews, because some of it's very
Yes.
apocalyptic shit, and at the end of that, they think that Jews will have to convert or die. Jesus comes back, temple destroyed, blah. Um,
Yeah.
and of course,
Can't wait.
Islam, Islam values Jesus as a prophet, just not quite as he's not their favorite. He's not their number one guy. Arguably, Islam values Jesus. Judaism is just like he was a nice young rabbi. He was one of ours, but then he
Yeah.
started this whole new thing.
Yeah.
Whereas Islam thinks Jesus is holy, he's just not their number one holy guy. Obviously, none of this ever translates. It's not. It doesn't work this way, but just the anti.
I just love your breakdown of these monotheistic religions' views on Jesus.
The anti-Islam thing. They don't think about it at all. I mean, nobody like they
Who?
just the people the anti just like the Islamophobes. It's just those are a different.
Oh.
They're a mass of different people. I remember asking my grandma about Japanese internment, what she remembered about it
Hmm.
when it happened. Um,
Hmm.
And she said that what she remembered was like it was vaguely sort of sad, but like nope, she didn't know anyone Japanese. Nobody knew anyone Japanese. Japanese were in
Hmm.
fact in a slightly less aggressive to her way, but still they were an alien, different
Yeah.
population. It didn't hit home, you know? And I just think that
Yeah.
I will never forget soon after 9/11 reading a poll in like a Time magazine or something when like 30% of people thought it would be okay to intern Muslims, which I now believe that
Yeah.
30% of people can be counted upon to respond insanely to any poll.
Yeah. Sure. Plus or five minus plus or minus 5%. But um, yeah, depending on
margin
which day,
of error,
35,
margin of error
25.
and insanity. Yeah.
If I'm more optimistic or pessimistic about humanity on any given day, give the margin of error to that direction. But yeah, well, it's frustrating. I mean, in America, both Muslims and Jews are vanishingly scarce. Most people don't know them. I've met a number of people who I'm the first Jewish person they met. I think
Really?
it's around one. Yeah, I think it's around. You live in the Northeast,
Hmm.
my friend, and I'm from the Northeast. I'm from New York City, so yeah, I met a lot of Jews. But
I hear they have
uh,
Jewish people in New York City. It's true.
there's a few of yeah. But I think it's like around 1% for each Jews and Muslims in America. And I mean, the polls, people completely wildly overrate how many Jews and Muslims there are in America. Again, it's just we live in that world of abstractions. We live in our cable TV or whatever, or our screen, and then we come up with these weird conceptions of things. Um, and I think both of these issues are at play, and they're both a cause of a lot of violence and hatred, and a result of a lot of violence and hatred in a weird way. People reason to them from different premises and get to their or they sometimes reason them, sometimes start with them. I don't know. Either way, yeah, it's been frustrating to see these things rear their head. It's just so much the last few weeks. I mean, it just feels inescapable. Um, yeah.
Yeah. This is not, I don't have a good I was just thinking again about what you were talking about before with Hamas and the biggest victims of Hamas, usually being Palestinians.
Oh yeah.
And I was also recently seeing things about Israelis, ones who aren't happy with the response, being, sort of looked at as like they're not being treated super well either by the government or probably by some of their neighbors because they're supposed to fall
Yes.
in line too. I mean, because it's a
Yes.
team sport endeavor and they're not playing their best for the team. Or like
Yeah.
when we were all fighting ISIS, some of the worst people, and yeah, Yazidis were a big victim of them, but a lot of victims of oppressive Muslims are usually Muslims. But for some reason,
Yeah.
America never seems to remember that part. We act like
Yeah.
Americans were the biggest victims of, like
Yeah.
bad Muslim governments, and it's usually
Yeah.
Muslims.
Yeah.
But
Although
we
then it's unfortunate because that truth becomes twisted like everything and perverted into, well, that's why we need to change their regime, and so the Muslims can live under a proper government of our choosing, and they'll be
yes,
better off for that.
that always
Um,
works perfectly.
I yeah, it's important to note. I think the in both yeah both cases there you mentioned. I mean, my understanding is some of the most some of the Jews who most oppose Israel's disproportionate responses, and maybe even certain you know um, legal and institutional features of Israel itself. People who oppose that are some of the ultra Orthodox Jews in Israel, who view the Israel state and the way it functions as against Judaism and what it demands.
Which is
And
fascinating.
yeah, and everything gets lumped into collective guilt and collective punishment. Um, I've been accused, of being a bad Jewish person for my views on Israel, and it's viewed as very integral to many Jews' identity, um, and often understandably so. But still, to me, that's anti-Semitism of another flavor. I think the right wing ultimately, it's not they're not just in so many cases horribly Islamophobic on these issues, but they in their rampant conflation of the Israeli state with Jews is itself anti-Semitic. And I'm not the Israeli government, and neither are the Jews that happen to live in Israel. The Israeli government, state, and society are different things. People in the government that rules over them are different things. And the same argument then licenses their despicable attacks in Gaza, because, well, as we said, all Gazans are Hamas, and all Hamas are Gazans. So there's anti-Semitism in that flavor. And then you mentioned how the evangelicals that totally instrumentalize Jews in their apocalyptic narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just identifying or conflating a people or a religion or ethnicity with a state, and Jews and non-Jews alike do it. Um, and it's, to me, it's the major problem with Zionism as an entire project, as an ideology. I'm a libertarian. I don't think nationalism is the solution to anything. I don't think using the state to fight oppression or racism or anti-Semitism is successful. But people forget these messages when it comes to Israel, and it's viewed differently, and it's not viewed as identity politics. It's not viewed as ethnic nationalism. It's not viewed as those things, even though it is.
And again, the origin of Israel, I have more empathy as its origins as a nation state, because it's so purely the rest of the world screwed us, they abandoned us. Never going to do that again. This is our, we're not having any more Holocausts. Like, that's a much more sympathetic origin for a state,
Sure.
but that's never going to work out because states are states. And also, there were already people living there.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
And the religious
Yes.
mess of the intertwining
That's,
religious beliefs
yes.
and desires. But yeah, you're right about it. Identity politics never applies there, and never really applies to nation states when right-wing people are critiquing identity politics. For some reason, that they don't think that's the same thing.
God damn it, Lucy! I'm an American, and I'm against identity politics, but I'm an American first.
That's a really good point. I have never been. Yeah, I am not Jewish. I have been accused of being Jewish twice when I wrote about Nazis. And that was an interesting experience. But I've never been told I have to support this. I've been told as a woman I should be a mainstream Democrat. That's about it. And that wasn't, that's not a very traumatic experience. No one told me I have to support a nation state somewhere I've never been because I am of a certain category. So I think I
kind of love using that as like a really, like, acting as if that were like a really like lethal insult to throw at people. You should be a mainstream Democrat.
I mean, that is a thing, but I don't know.
That's pretty funny.
Vote blue no matter.
Just make lists of things we've been accused of. You've got Jewish twice, and then mainstream Democrat.
And I've gotten a lot of far right people being like, "Someday you'll understand. You'll." Oh, you're libertarian?
Sure.
Oh, that's good. But you'll understand eventually. You should be a conservative.
Yeah, when you grow up.
Yeah, when I grow up.
When you enter your 20s.
Any day now, I'll become a conservative.
I bet when I'm 20, I'll probably be an arch conservative. I'm sure. I might even be a monarchist. By the time I'm 20, I'll have so much wisdom. By 30, I'll be an outright fascist.
That's the way.
I shouldn't say that. Because that's still coming up.
Growing up, you're 20, you're like William F. Buckley. By 30, you're just a raving Nazi. It's just
oh my God.
biological. It's a part of growing up. We all go through it.
And then by 40, you're a Georgist.
Hey, I have minor sympathy for Georgism now.
Well, compared to some of the other things we're discussing, certainly so. But
yeah, it's looking pretty good compared to a lot of things. That's true.
I'll take Georgism.
Yeah. If I could,
yeah.
Wow, what a journey we had.
Should we move on from that? I feel like we talked a lot about that. I wanted to talk about an article you wrote, which I really enjoyed, and I thought it would be good fodder for discussion, because you wrote that article about children's rights recently.
Well, thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate that. You were one of the first people I talked to about children's rights back when I wasn't as convinced, because I was thinking of the most dramatic examples of like a 2-year-old wants to move out and live with the neighbor who seems sketchy. Like I think there are some unresolvable contradictions, but it's one of those things where we're so far from even thinking about the concept of children's rights most of the time that if we need a
Yeah,
dramatic swing in that direction is not going to be like you're going on trial because you grabbed your kid's arms because they were going to run into the street. Like we can
yeah.
move, like with pacifism, we can move so far, so much closer without having to really iron out like the most difficult bits yet. And
No, that's a good analogy.
the Daily Beast article, I was desperately trying to introduce an overview of the very idea into a kind of a mainstream, not C4SS type of publication. And I don't know how well I succeeded, but I tried to talk about Moms for Liberty crap as a little
Yeah,
bit of a hook because there are so many people who think that it's self-evident that, okay, even the people who are like, you shouldn't be telling school boards what books my kids can read. You can just tell your own kids what books they can read. And my thinking is,
yeah,
why do you get to decide what books your
yeah.
kids until
I
the
was
age
gonna
of
say like
18? I mean, that would be crazy.
right. That is crazy. I think I should decide what books their kids should read.
It
Because
would be
I think
dense
that's outlandish. So
philosophy.
I feel like
They wouldn't understand any of it, and they would never read again in disgust.
I'll give them some comics.
Okay, that's fair. That's good. Um,
Uh, well, I'm
yeah,
not surprised you explaining the rationale of your piece. I mean, I feel like a lot of your pieces read that way, which I've always really enjoyed with your writing. I think you're among the best at balancing the kind of needs of journalism and writing to a diverse audience with being principled and conveying like a genuine substantive view of yours
I
as
think
well, and not in any way that like waters it down or disguises it, even because I think those things are like immoral, basically, like dishonest, essentially. Um, but speaking in plain and approachable language, and speaking to a diverse audience, I think I kind of struggle with that. Probably because I read, I guess I read a fair bit of philosophy, and stuff, and that tends to be a little verbose. There I go again. Uh, but yeah, I really enjoyed too your piece highlighting the kind of paradoxes you said, the kind of flip side issues where it's almost like we don't grant children any rights, but then we grant them too many rights at the same time in our society, and the weirdness of that. Like you point out the how many states where you can get married as a minor, um, or like especially like pointing out how like maybe you can get a job as a minor. Um, but otherwise, your property, like you can't have a savings account. So then, in what sense there's this paradox or this gap there? And
well, I
so that
believe
was actually really thought provoking.
your parent can open a savings account for you and be on. I think I had that when I
Well,
was.
no, yes, I think when you're like 14, yeah, you can have like a co account, but you're not allowed to have one of your own if you have, because which you should, right? If you're allowed to have a job, then
Yeah,
why can't you save that money in your own? That's what exactly the paradox that's happening.
I mean, your parents can take all of your money.
Yeah,
There's a thing in California called it's like a
the
Coogan's
Jackie
law.
Coogan law.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's only in California and it's not even a big
yeah,
percentage of a child like actor etc's wages that has to go into an account for them. It's like 10% or something. And in
yeah,
other places, they don't even have that. There's been some
yeah.
recent talk about children of influencers, people who have been filmed on YouTube their whole lives. There was that again with
Yes,
daughters. There was a whole conflict with the one daughter who kind of broke away a little bit in her book, which I haven't read, but about the financial aspects of the patriarch was getting a ton of money from their reality show that tormented them, gave them no privacy in their lives, and they were getting minimum wage after fighting for it. There was no set aside, okay, all the kids get this
yeah,
much. No, it was just like the dad gets the money because,
yeah,
I mean, it's absurd.
yeah. Yes, and you. That's there's an interesting parallel there. I mean, you draw the parallel in your article about how people thought women's suffrage would just double the man's vote, the household man's vote, in effect. Which I have never even really heard or thought of that argument. Which is makes sense that people said that, but not a good argument. Uh, and there's an interesting parallel there um, um, to what we were just talking about.
With the
To the to
finance or work. What?
Oh. I feel like I forgot the analogy now that I meant to make. So I
Fair
don't
enough.
know. You gotta stay in school, kids.
Or don't. I mean, it's not.
But
There's
well,
some.
it's interesting that like the Jackie Hoogan law is kind of interesting though. It's really depressing because it's just this niche that they carved out to like better exploit child actors, and now it's just like it's
Yeah.
weird how we make this exception like you can't do child labor but child acting, when in fact that is has its own wild set of possible negative consequences. You
And
know,
seems
so what there's
we can see the negative consequences in lots of real humans. Like I read
yeah.
the Jeanette McCurdy book, "I'm Glad My Mom Died," where she had
Oh
no
yeah.
interest. She ended up on Disney Channel. She had no interest in being an
Yeah.
actor at any point in her life, but her mom sure did, and there she was, and like, whew,
I've seen
that,
a lot from that. I didn't read the book, but I've read a number of excerpts, and it's
it's
really depressing.
it's depressing. After I read it, I
It's
was like, I'm
horrible, and
glad
that's
your mom died
yeah,
too, Jeanette. Like,
yeah. It's a real shame. I used to see her on TV. I have the same birthday as Shem McCurdy, and then it's then all this stuff about it makes you feel bad in hindsight,
hmm
if you watched her on TV or something growing up. And it's a shame that parents have that kind of authority.
I also the thing with child marriage. I actually found that the ACLU of California was wrong about that, which they're not usually wrong that much, but when they were trying to change the law about under 18 marriages in California, the ACLU was against that. And it's a bit of a contradiction because getting married, surely it's almost like emancipation. So like isn't that a good thing if you want teens to have more rights? But it never turns out that way because they don't have
Yeah,
all the other rights of an adult.
yeah,
It's a way of trapping someone with someone else. And if you come from, say, a religious, oppressive community where they're encouraging, to say it nicely, you to marry someone older, and then you're with
yeah,
him and you're trapped with him, you might as well be his child, except with even more disturbing possibilities in terms of trapping you. I mean, it doesn't work. Like, also, as I said in the article, like, I think that you need certain possibilities for teen employment, things like teenage like sex work, things like that where people frequently do it out of desperation. If they're a runaway or something, it's the best thing they can do. You
right,
can't go work in a store if you're 15. Maybe you can trade sexual things with someone to stay with them. Great stuff you don't want to happen, but you can understand how it happens. You want
yeah,
safer opportunities for kids who have just parents they can't live with. It's not going to work. But we don't want what we have now plus 13-year-olds working in a slaughterhouse at night, like insane shit that Republicans seem to want to happen. Like, I mean, you can make these arguments that any little bit of rights is in the right direction, but in this case, I don't think it is. It's like women's suffrage, but more extreme in terms of like than that ever was in terms of children being property. And
yeah,
I don't know how to
yeah,
fix it, but there's something very
yeah,
wrong.
yeah. I think it's frustrating thorniness. I do agree. How to cash it out. It's easy to say children's rights, but
Their brains are
what that
squishy.
means.
They don't like you don't know as much. You're not as in control, until you're 25 or whatever. So some people have turned that into, well, I guess until you're 25 you should be a child now, but it's just not being
My
balanced
under,
well.
my my novice understanding is a lot of that stuff that excessively centers supposed brain development until you're 24, 25 is kind of on bullshit grounds. Maybe people can correct me or point to more things, our listeners and viewers, but that's one of the most annoying arguments to me in a lot of different scenarios and topics, that plays on like weirdly intuitive things, but like not necessarily anything grounded scientifically, um, in terms of like just for everyone. Like when you're 24 or 25, now the brain
The
has
kitchen
stopped. I mean
timer
the brain,
dings. You're
the
done.
brain.
Your brain is all cooked.
Oh my god. But like the brain continues to change as you get older through your entire life, right? Your whole body it's like how the brain, not no part of your body just somehow reaches a state, and then now it's the same for the rest of your life.
I mean,
It's
brain
not a thing.
plasticity is a thing, but as far as my
Well,
understanding
yes.
is, by the time you're about 7 or 8, that's already kind of not a factor anymore. Like if you're really abused, in the first 5 years of your life, you're gonna have a real hard time. I'm sorry, the first like 8 years of your life, you're gonna have a real time. You can't recover fully from that.
Right.
There was a really
Yeah.
grim child abuse case in the 70s where a girl was locked in a room for about 13 years, and they tried to figure out how much she could recover, and it was obviously not, to a normal level. Like there's something
Yeah.
there, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
surely it's overly simplified to think, well, 25, okay, it's all.
Yeah, no, I'm not denying brain plasticity. If anything, I'm saying it just people are saying brain plasticity ends at a certain arbitrary cutoff point, and that's my understanding is not at all the case. That your brain plasticity carries on throughout life, and what experiences you have. And whatever the case, really, it's still a bad argument for taking people's rights away or thinking other people like have more wisdom or right to be in charge of their lives in general. Now, I agree, as you say, obviously, and in which the article, you talk about the difficulty in balancing. Children are not um, full self authors, um, and so they take help and guidance, like you say. I think so. How does that cash out while respecting their rights is really thorny.
Or
I do
how do you,
appreciate your article pushing it in the right direction without going above and staying like kind of having humility about how it cashes out. But clearly, the direction should be a certain way.
the first response I saw to the article on Twitter was someone calling me a statist.
For what? For like
For
just
the
they
article.
just saw the headline and well, it's interesting because I don't know. I mean, youth rights, children's rights has been like totally corrupted in my experience the last couple years in the discourse because of insane uh, homophobic and transphobic paranoia, trying or in some cases anti-Semitism, tying those things and those groups into being predators of children and abusers and etc. As because I've gotten tons of responses like that whenever I mention youth rights on the internet or like on Twitter. Um, define everything from define youth rights to get the wood chipper to okay, Mr. Weinstein, to
Right.
the whole parade of you use the phrase youth rights, you must endorse child abuse, because that's now the world we're living in, where that term and that integral aspect of justice and extension of rights, as you argue in the article, is now totally distorted in discussion.
That would be slightly closer to reasonable in like the 70s. I mean, not all of that, obviously, but because the 70s, I feel like people all
Right.
flirted more with like my husband and I joke about everyone was sounds creepy in the 70s, like Nambla. It's closest to being
Yeah.
mainstream accepted. Like there was some
Yeah.
every rock star you like from that era was sleeping with
Yeah.
groupies or
Yep.
who were,
Yep.
14. Like,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
actually,
No, you
um,
also have like academic stuff. I mean, you have Foucault, who people harp on this to attack, like to make bad faith attacks. But then also, yes, there's the truth of Foucault and a bunch of other postmodernists um, saying some really sketchy stuff on this topic, if not outright terrible stuff on it, and even signing letters in support of changing certain laws in these ways. Um, and so I feel like that is just though harped on and sort of used as like a bad faith kernel by a lot of people to like attack an entire set of views or something, or impugn an entire set of views or group of people
or even
as well. I mean,
something
each of
that's
those
not.
cases I think you mentioned are like Namble. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah,
The others, all of them. I mean, they can just
I was gonna say that Jesse Walker, my friend from Reason, wrote a piece kind of about the history in the 70s when these things flirted with mainstream acceptance for a minute. as a contrast with now and the groomer bullshit, and also as a surely if you've been on the internet too much, you can see usually Gen Z people being like, oh, 18-year-old dating a 20-year-old, that sounds problematic. You can make fun of it, but there's an element almost of over being like, oh, an age gap, which kind of speaks to the fact that we're getting farther away from the creepy NAMBLA 70s shit. Almost like the groomer shit is complete bullshit. And,
Yeah.
we could get insane about that. My parents have a 9-year age difference. I have a 4-year age
Yeah.
difference with my husband. So obviously it's all problematic. But, the idea
Yeah.
that we're on the cusp of, yay, pedophilia, quote that out of
Yeah.
context, is nonsense. Just looking at people's attitudes.
Yeah, I agree.
People are getting really weird about that. And, pedophilia should never be normalized, obviously. I think that by ignoring it, we're not helping people, and trying to fix it by helping people admit if they have problems, is working better than dead secret until we arrest you if we happen to catch you if you actually
Oh,
commit
sure.
aggression. Not
Sure.
normalizing in the parade about it. I don't
Yeah.
know why I'm
Yeah.
talking like the right wing people, at least the people who originated this, are remotely on good faith in any way. Chris
Yeah,
Russo.
I think it's a mix of bad faith and sort of manipulated or weaponized paranoia, and you know, yeah, I agree with you. If anything, the only realm it seems to me in which people still stridently normalize something that comes close to pedophilia is what he talked about in the article, which is the right wing defenses of child marriage, um,
Correct.
and,
I
and and
love
those relationships.
now. I assuming that the state representative. I had to quote him. My editor let me keep it in because the quote was so perfect. The state representative against raising the age to 18 said he knew a 12 and 13-year-old who got married like a decade or two ago and it worked out great. And he then said it's the parents' right to make that
Yeah,
decision, which is an insane thing to say.
yeah,
It's a parent's right to encourage a 12 and 13-year-old to get married. I don't know if anyone was pregnant or not. That's another thing. It's a great way to get rid of anyone embarrassing and pregnant. Just shove them off
yeah.
towards, the father of the child.
Yeah. Well, it's an entirely, like a lot of things I think, and power structures that we're kind of navigating and trying our best to navigate. But it's this false binary of parents versus government, and people tend to side on like, oh, the abuses of one tend to be a little more than the abuses of the other. So then I have to depend on the other one as like a counterweight to the
Right.
initial one. And so they end up, I think, with some good faith disagreements on that dispute. And trying, but I think the problem underlying, right, is trying to navigate what ultimately it should be more up to the child, as you say in the article. And we're ignoring a third option. We're assuming this shared um, mistake of assuming that children are just property of parents or government or
Right.
shared.
Choose one, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, or even an uneasy sharing thing. And there are three
Yeah.
parties. At least there are three parties involved. You can get more, more particular than that, but I feel like a betrayer of a former homeschooler because I'm getting more uncomfortable with certain homeschooled. My parents were good. I was not sheltered from the world. I was a weirdo reading. I just read magazines and books and newspapers all day, and I kind of knew what was what. I wasn't, you know, I don't think I was ill treated at all. I'm glad I didn't go to school. I didn't want to go to school. I don't want people to
Yeah.
conclude from this that public school and like a strict curriculum and daily visits from a social worker or whatever is going to fix it. But realistically, there's been a million abused kids who went to public school and nobody paid attention. Like that's obviously a thing. But the best way
Yeah.
to be totally off the grid is to be totally off the grid. If your kid, maybe no one knows they even exist, there's nobody out there who can see
Right.
the child, see if they're skinny or bruised or something. Just as a pure safety measure, somebody has to know that kids exist because
Yeah.
And an example I had to cut out was the Turpin family, who were a homeschooled family who were found because the little badass teen jumped out the window and got the cops after years of abuse. And at least half of the 13 children, I think, were over 18. So you could be like, well, they could have left. Well, sure, except their entire life was spent being
Yeah.
warped by their horrible parents. They had no
Yeah.
resources, no education. I mean, at some point you have to pick an arbitrary age of adulthood, I think. I can't think of a better way. But you also can't be like, well, you're an adult, so you could have left. I mean, because of the inherent power of the
Yeah.
parents over kids, they mold their whole
Yeah.
world. And the more abusive they are, and the more they keep you away from the rest of the world, the more control over who you are they have, and it's too much.
Yeah. I feel again, just the false binary. It's like again, I'm picking either Israeli government or Hamas or something. I have to pick either abusive home life or abusive government life.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's always in tension in all of human society, the private and public spheres, and there's a tendency far too much with libertarians to think that the private sphere is um, just a pure manifestation of like your own like rights
yeah,
and what to do, and any intrusion or something is by the outside world, whether government or other non-governmental, even to protect the rights of another person in your household counts as some sort of statist or rights violating aggression. And I mean, that's just preposterous. Unfortunately, the family and home life and the private sphere has been historically one of the least libertarian spaces, and
absolutely.
one of the most violent and sexist, ageist spaces, and not conducive to autonomy and self authorship. This is the whole dispute. This is the tension with the marketplace and markets giving a valve or an exit to abusive home life, more so than had existed prior, where now you can perhaps earn an income and a living and a place to stay, untethered from your parents' authority and approval, and income stream. Uh, and this is the tension with people, I think, who tend to ignore the family's abuses and worship it far too much, and then see these valves as dangerous, and public life itself then becomes some sort of threat into the what should only
Anything
be
secular,
private.
anything public, anything, yeah, just
Well,
anything
yeah, and it gets
mindset.
particularly tied into religion.
It is.
That yeah, of course, and with homeschooling, I think you would have been weird whether you're homeschooled or not. So it's not about
Thank you.
that, but um, yeah, it's a shame that again, just too far to one side. Oh well, there's these instances of abuse. Well, then we should just ban homeschooling,
Right.
and then uh, it's pretty it's absurd leap of logic, and that's a really utterly authoritarian in my view. I don't like seeing the popularity sometimes on the left and among some liberals about views like you can't homeschool
Right.
or that's inherently authoritarian. No, it can be done in authoritarian ways, but it doesn't have to be. In many cases, it isn't. It would be a terrible injustice to stop those other cases.
So we got to do something. I just don't know what.
That's the
Um,
general message and takeaway from our show, I think, and in life, in my everyday life, we got to do something,
well,
something for sure.
I was going to say, in the case of the Turpin child who escaped, her realization that the outside world was out there came from a phone, and came particularly from Justin Bieber videos, and I just love that because that's
It's
sort of a.
amazing.
I mean, that shit happen in North Korea sometimes. People risking their
Yeah,
lives to smuggle like South Korean
yeah,
soap operas on flash drives. Just
yeah.
that's the thing. Secular culture, trashy culture, mainstream culture. If all you have is the authoritarian, tiny circumstances of where you are, that can be, I don't know, that can be like the most liberatory thing possible, which I find so interesting. Like, you could argue that it is inherently oppressive to keep such tight control over children, like not let them leave that. Like, there's clearly
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know how to fix this, but you can't. That's not working when you have that type of. I don't know.
Yeah,
And just the
yeah,
fact that people, again, Hoppaites, want authoritarianism on a localized scale. They like it. They think it's good.
yeah,
It
yeah,
reinforces patriarchal views, religious views. They like
yeah,
it. And so, even if I
yeah,
think the state is the biggest, most dangerous thing, which I do, I now realize that to ignore other institutions is foolish, especially the home and the
yes,
family, which is the hardest one to get into a liberatory shape, but
yeah,
certainly more has to be done there.
yeah. I agree wholeheartedly about the necessity and the importance of the issue, but then the complexity. I think feminism has done a very interesting and looking historically wise, very surprising victory and making the home more uh, libertarian and
Yeah,
more open to self authorship. And like you say, you know, in some ways, the next step then is how to do this with children who themselves aren't full self authors yet.
hmm
Is even more difficult and maybe and then is impressing. Um,
I like to see any kind of optimism about strides, though, because people are allergic to optimism. So your shout out to feminism actually doing some good work. That's nice.
Shout out to feminism.
Good job, feminism.
Um, People are also allergic to pessimism. I don't know. Depends on time of day or the mood, but
Occasionally things get better. It turns out.
you know what I'm allergic to? Halloween. Just enough.
Um, I don't know when this will be released, so maybe this will be about next Halloween. Who knows? Got any Halloween plans there in the last few minutes?
No, no. I don't really like Halloween.
How come?
I think it's kind of dumb, and I'm just not interested in your antics and your tomfoolery right now.
It's because you're an old
And in
professor
general,
with a majestic beard, and the children are haranguing you,
my wife loves Halloween, and she dresses up and loves to give out candy to the trick or treaters.
and you just read
And
Foucault inside, just like eating
yep,
like
specifically, that's my Halloween tradition: reading
bran
Foucault,
muffins. I don't know.
eating bran muffins, and reading Foucault every Halloween, baby. Yes. What else would I be doing with my time? If you're doing anything else with your time on a Halloween night, you're a heathen and a degenerate.
Do you like any holidays?
Oh, I love holidays, and
Okay.
I love like insofar Halloween is like a celebratory holiday rather than like an annoying like tradition. Just are you pro or anti Halloween? You're kind of playing your cards close to the
I'm
chest here.
I'm very pro Halloween. I don't feel as usual. The last decade or two, I haven't been very like I don't make elaborate costumes. I don't plan far ahead. But whimsy and candy and vaguely spooky, all of these are good things. So, and I had a great I'm starting to realize might be like a 1950s childhood Halloween. My friend, who is the
Oh,
exact same age almost, was saying she went trick or treating at night like once in her childhood. I was like, I become an old man when I like, yo, you go trick or treating at 2 p.m. at the mall on the 28th because otherwise strangers will poison your candy. In my day, we did it at night, even if it was a weekday. It was dark, and we walked, so we earned that candy. And
you
my
well,
mom
you
made
know,
costumes. It was good. It was a good childhood thing.
well, I'm glad you had a good childhood and a good Halloween, and that the 1950s were good to you.
They were,
But
absolutely.
um, I don't, from my experience, I don't really have a strong position on when trick or treating should or shouldn't take place, except never. But um, moving around, I think it might be a location thing. Like when I lived in New York, people trick or treated right after school, like you said, and during when light was still out. But when I moved to Virginia, I lived in Northern Virginia for a part of my life. There, they were a rambunctious bunch. They waited till it was nighttime, and I think it might just have to do with like, well, which place was safer at night. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
that actually might like, what kind of like place do you live, and like, is it very urban or like very like just not that many houses around, and like, or are you living in New York? I think people just disagree on when to do it based on where they live.
People are
My
also
experience.
insane though about stranger danger, and they were in the '90s too.
Oh, of
But just
course, of course. Oh, I think there's a paranoia about that. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not really like saying any and one way or the other is better. But
I like
Halloween does bring out the paranoia.
the upheaval of the night where you are requesting candy from strangers is delightful. Like the normal rules do not apply. Don't take candy from strangers except the one night where you request it. It's delightful,
You just like transgressiveness for its own sake. It seems like,
especially
which
when it
I
involves
find
candy. Candy.
deplorable. I do like candy. Maybe I'll get some candy and just not give it out to anyone else. Would
I've
that
actually
count as me
never
celebrating Halloween?
I've never given out candy. One of these days I'll actually do it. Because where we
Do you
live,
got?
my parents lived, that you just like no one. It was at the top of a spooky hill, so no one would ever come up there.
Oh, you got no trick or treaters.
No, yeah, it
I
was
didn't know if you pretend not to be home.
just
That's why
nobody
you
would
didn't give
come
out
up.
candy.
It's just
Oh, well, you need to make them more enticing. Clearly,
should have
maybe
made
try
like
luring them in with candy.
wild. Yeah, should have been a whole thing.
You could
Um,
give them, like libertarian books. Maybe that'll bring the trick or treaters out.
my father would definitely do that if he was like on the,
Yeah,
yeah.
you could just print out your own articles. Be like, hey, I wrote this.
That's a terrible
Have you heard of children's rights? Well, you have the right to get off my lawn, but take my article first.
and this
Happy
candy
Halloween.
to go with it, just to soften the.
No, I would still keep the candy, but the
Uh,
other stuff, yeah.
the candy's just for you.
I don't
Uh,
understand giving away candy. That's a weird. Talk about.
your Randianness is coming out all of a sudden. Your secret, just a sprinkle of objectivism is there.
I
Why
don't
would
know
you
if Rand had a problem with giving
rational?
out candy. She probably refused to like give out cigarettes and speed. Like she'd want to like haul, all that to herself. But which I guess the kind of it's like the candy for adults.
I don't know where to
But
get that free though. Maybe somewhere someone will.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe trick or treating in the future will be this way.
I like to think so.
Kids get
Um,
candy. Adults get some cigarettes. Maybe.
do you ever watch spooky movies on Halloween? Do you have any intention to do
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I like movies. So last couple years, me and my wife just like do a total horror movie marathon, and during all of October, just like totally inundate ourselves with scary movies, taking turns picking movies. And I gotta tell you, last year it got to the point where we were both having nightmares. I mean,
Oh no!
we'd be watching like 2 horror movies a night, so it's like 60 movies in the month. Maybe not
Gotta
that
pace
many, but
yourself.
on average.
Yourself. Yeah.
So it was like we like movies. So far, nothing problematic this year. We've been enjoying the movies. We've watched the Saw franchise. I enjoy the Saw franchise, and the new one came out.
I've
So
never seen those, but I have read about them on Wikipedia. They seem very silly.
they are very silly. They're such good silliness and fun. My wife picks more elevated, serious horror movies. Probably better.
I don't slashery sadism. I don't because I would just cover my eyes through most of it. So sort of what would the
Well,
point
do you
be?
like what kind of spooky movies do you like?
Well, the last moderately spooky. I mean, like I watched Train. I rewatched Train to Busan a couple weeks ago. I made
I
my
don't know
parents
what that
watch
is.
it. That is a South Korean zombie movie. It's
Oh
really
shit.
good. I like it a lot.
Okay,
It's
maybe I should
actually
watch it.
very devastating at the end. But I'm from Pittsburgh, and I am very near the origin of modern zombieism because George Romero. There is a horrible abandoned mall where Night of the Living Dead was filmed. That's not so far away. So I come from Zombieland. So over the last like 5 years, I've actually finally gotten on board with zombies, and I'm actually quite partial to them. It turns out. But Shaun of the Dead is still the best one because British people are good at movies.
What's the appeal of the zombie genre? I mean, I don't get it. I've seen a couple. It's never done much for me.
I mean,
Is
I
it
guess, for me, I suddenly realized that part of it is clearly that it is a Venn diagram middle of apocalyptic and horror a lot of the time. And I love
okay?
apocalypse movies.
Okay.
So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, why is the like? I always roll my eyes at people talking about how Dawn of the Dead is like, oh, it's a commentary on capitalism, bro, because they go to the mall and hide. I'm like, yeah, but that mall had a bunch of shit that kept them alive. It's not actually a very good commentary. The mall actually helped them. So like, I don't know what. Or like in
I've
Night of
never
the
seen
Dead,
Dawn of the Dead.
Night of the Living Dead, the
I've seen that one.
protagonist is a black man.
Yeah.
And it was from the late 60s, so that and like he was like a like a regular like serious like protagonist, and just by virtue of the time and stuff that seems vaguely transgressive and like good, obviously. But George Romero also said that he just cast him because he cast him, and it wasn't. So you can put your own sort of you know you can get something out of it that maybe wasn't even put there in the first place. But
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's the fun of movies and art in a lot of way. I mean, I love to talk about what the author may have intended, look at their lives and their all their movies together, but then also whatever you can get out of it yourself.
yeah, it's not always like whenever I hear Spike Lee talk about oh my god, Do the Right
Do the
Thing.
right thing?
Yeah. He's always like, oh, obviously it was the right decision for his character to burn the pizza shop. It's been a couple years since I saw that movie, though I do think it's
Spoilers.
good. I'm like, I don't know that it's obvious, Spike. I didn't get anything obvious out of it, but he thinks it's obvious, and I think there's a little more ambiguity on screen, a little more conflict. So I don't know.
We'll talk about a complex movie to analyze and sort of morally audit. That's up there. Do the right thing. Very, a lot of parties and viewpoints that play in that movie. Kind of what makes it so interesting, I think. Um, we're talking about a lot about this lately with Scorsese. He has a new movie coming out, and his movies, Martin Scorsese's movies, kind of famously seem to be about not so good people.
Yeah.
Gangsters and vigilante taxi drivers and
I have not
etc.
seen many of
So,
his movies. He's definitely on my list
oh,
of.
okay,
I've seen half of Taxi Driver. I fell asleep watching it, but only because it was like 3 in the morning, not because it was like boring. But some of the staples, I suppose, stereotypically male cinema guy staples, I haven't seen a lot of them. Like I have yet to see The Godfather or Goodfellas. All the movies about organized crime, I have not yet watched.
yeah.
I'm sure I
Oh, have
will.
you seen High School Musical 2? That's my favorite Scorsese movie, I think.
No, but is it
Better.
Coppola who directed Jack, which is a god awful
Oh
movie?
man, are you asking to just? We're like an hour and a half in, and you're just asking for me to get all riled up again. No,
Why am I so
so
mad?
so Coppola has directed some great movies, including
Also, I
Jack.
absolutely confused them, by the way. Coppola and Scorsese.
That's okay. That's okay. Coppola did the Godfather's movies, and Scorsese did the Goodfellas, and they're all really good. I'm a total Jack defender. Coppola himself defends
Wow!
Jack. He's like people thought I just made movies like The Godfather, and
So
Jack is
then,
such a fun.
what if
Jack is.
Progeria was wacky? That's what that movie is. What if Progeria was wacky?
I
Progeria
don't know what
being.
that means.
Progeria is the real disease that
Oh,
kills children
okay,
and they don't look
okay,
like Robin Williams, but they look wizened
right,
and old, I
okay,
suppose, in certain ways, and they die when they're a teenager. So
right.
literally, Jack is like, what if it was fun, like wacky with Robin Williams? I fucking hate that
Well,
movie.
I don't think that movie. I mean, it's very sentimental, but I like that about it. Um, it's not all fun. I mean, in fact, I think it sort of got lambasted, and maybe people don't know how to react to it because it is a shuffling around of a lot of weird tones of
Yeah,
like
that's what
fun,
I'm
of like
bad. Yeah.
Jack like playing basketball and having fun to like Jack like being in a nightclub, like getting beat up because he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's wearing like light up shoes. And I don't know. That movie always resonated to me as a kid. Admittedly, not a popular movie, but one I will always defend as
I
as
also hate
as
Big, if that helps, which is,
I guess you're consistent.
I
Um,
guess so.
I like Jack even more than Big. I think Jack is more philosophical, but but I also enjoy Big. I guess you just don't like these kinds of movies. Do you like 13 Going on 30, or
I mean, it's
which is also
more
good,
it goes
also a
down
good
easier
movie.
in terms of like it doesn't annoy me in the same way. It's just sort of, I don't know. I wouldn't speak very
Well,
highly.
anyway, Scorsese's movies, though, like, people criticize them for, are they endorsing the bad behaviors of their protagonists,
It's a pretty
and
shallow
I
critique most of the time.
oh, I completely agree. I completely agree. But it's just a matter of what we were discussing in terms of, like, well, does it matter? First of all, like, what they intended? Like, what if the real world reaction has, I mean, Taxi Driver more or less prompted an assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan.
Sure,
Um,
but that's not.
but Ronald Reagan wasn't a great president.
At the end of it,
So,
let's look at
no,
the
I'm not endorsing anything like
oh,
that.
yeah.
What?
Um, um, I think it matters what like the makers of the art intended, and it matters what you get out of it. Like I think that's just one of
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's silly to dismiss because of what you take to be the intentions, which you may be wrong about. But even if you're not, there's so much more.
So if you watch like I don't know Triumph of the Will and you like I don't see Nazism at all, then I'll be like, well, it's there. Like at some point.
Well, yeah, I think there's just like you could interpret. I do think there's better and worse interpretations. Um,
Yeah.
it's just like that would obviously be like a terrible and just wrong interpretation of what the movie is. Um, but like it's easier to to figure out what's the movie depicting versus what is it endorsing, I guess.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
That's the rub.
That's
I mean, it's
yeah.
hard to. But also if you think Triumph of the Will is like not endorsing, admittedly I've never seen Triumph of the Will, but I've read about it, and I'm
I've
pretty
seen
sure it's
movies.
endorsing Nazism.
I've seen documentaries about Leni Riefenstahl. If nothing else, she was the most
Okay,
naive person in the world. It's more there is all the
okay,
whole
uh,
overlap between beautiful human form and fascism is a whole thing. Like there's a there's a whole thing.
what?
It's a whole thing.
Okay, well,
Trust
it's
me.
a whole thing. We don't have time for it, listeners and viewers, because it's reportedly a whole thing.
It's true.
Well, what's your favorite spooky movie? Do you want to land on that? Do we have a favorite or a
It's really
couple?
hard to pick just one. I'm gonna throw down. I love a Nazi. Wow. Okay, that was weird. We were just talking about that. No, that's wrong. Okay, I love an alien. That's not the same thing. A movie because
What
they
alien?
actually
What's their name?
I do that freak me out. Alien movies tend to freak me out a little bit because they really did when I was little.
Like
Um,
E.T.
that one the government's actually scarier. I think. Um, just like in real life. Uh, I often rewatch Signs, which doesn't make sense if you think too hard about it, but has just the most beautiful, menacing
I don't
atmosphere.
know if I saw it.
It's very claustrophobic. I just said I liked apocalypse movies. This is kind of the opposite because it's one family in an apocalypse potential situation. Claustrophobic, aliens are lurking. It's in Pennsylvania. I don't care if it doesn't make sense at the end. It just has a great atmosphere. I also love the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers because it's just it's a 50s classic. I don't know.
And you love the 50s, as we established.
No, I do not. But that movie's kind of great.
Oh, okay.
And again, oh by the way, to tie that back, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. People are like, oh, it's about communism. Oh, it's about McCarthyism.
Right.
Oh, it's about
Right.
maybe it's neither. I don't know.
Yeah. Horror is ripe for that with, whether intended or projected, these symbols and allegories for all sorts of things you can imagine, political ideologies, sexual minorities, racial minorities, everything. It's very
Samantha
interesting.
Bond Carter.
I personally think the entire Saw franchise is all about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and people don't really see that in
I,
those movies. But
I mean, I
yeah,
haven't seen
my
it, but
favorites.
I bet it's not.
You should. Then you'd understand Israel-Palestine.
All right, fine.
But I like the Saw movie. They're underrated. They're really fun and unique and like frenetic, sort of just great twists.
No.
I recommend them. You should give them a chance. I mean, they're not for everyone because they're very like visual and gory. But that's not that's the least interesting or fun part about them. I enjoy the plots, and they develop this sort of lore and mythology throughout as the series develops, with like, disorienting yourself with where you are in the story and the timeline and the parties that are all kind of involved. They're very interesting in that way. I also love the Halloween franchise. We watched that one last year.
I've
Now,
only
also has,
seen the original, just the first
just
one.
like the Saw movies, has some sinkers, but as any
Mm.
franchise does. But well, the original is the best. Maybe you should stop while you're ahead. I mean, the original is far superior to the others.
It's possible.
But a fun franchise that like reboots like over and over again. So it's kind of like fun to get into the different parallel worlds of where Halloween goes or could go. My favorite spooky movie is kind of an unknown movie. It's called The Vanishing. It's an 80s European movie. I think half French, half Dutch. But so subtitles are good, which you should try out. You could watch this, and it's not your traditional. It's maybe more into the thriller side. I really enjoy it. It's called The Vanishing. It's about like, without, I can't really give too much away, but it's about a man whose girlfriend is kidnapped, and he's like obsessed with knowing what happened and figuring out what happened. And the movie just plays with knowledge and with lack of knowledge, with ignorance, and like the fright and the horror of the not knowing about the world, and the not knowing certain things, and the drive, and almost like death drive and self-destructive wish of to know certain things at all costs. And so the movie's just very interesting on that level, and I find that much scarier than all the gore, all the fake guts in the world, which I don't really care about. Um,
So a
and all the jump
philosophical
scares and
spooky
everything.
story. How very you.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think people would like it. Stanley Kubrick said it was the scariest movie he ever saw. So I'll take any chance to maybe agree with Kubrick's taste
I
on
mean,
film.
that's
But
intriguing enough to want to
yeah,
watch.
yeah, I'd be really curious what you think about it. If you it's on something or something, I think you would like it. It's just, yeah, it's very meditative and but in that scary way. Maybe it's hard to describe, but it's so different than these other horror movies, which can be great, but are very aggressive.
Yeah.
Another, I guess, for lack of a better word.
I like spooky disappearance things too. There's an
Mm,
inherent fascination with disappearance, or did they
yeah,
ever exist at all? Which is like a sub
yeah,
genre.
yeah. I guess you're right. That is fun. It's kind of its whole genre. Now to say that. Hmm.
Um, well,
Well,
my goodness, I do not regret one thing except the first 5 minutes of this podcast. Everything else, mwah, it was gold, Jerry.
no, I think
So,
the first 5 minutes also were good, but
we better wrap this up though. I'm gonna go do laundry. That's my exciting task.
oh, have fun, have fun.
Thank you. I'll
That's
try.
awesome. I'm really glad for you.
Having fresh laundry
Um,
is nice though. You feel powerful. Like every door is open to you.
I feel rejuvenated and reborn when I put on my freshly clean clothes. It's
Absolutely.
true.
Um, well,
Well, thanks for being with us, fans and non-fans as well. I'm sure there's more of
especially
the
the
latter.
non-fans, especially our
The
haters.
the the people watching to feel hatred and to um, to hate us. It's true.
We will see you again around a month from whenever this is released. One of
We'll
these
see you
weeks.
again next month.
We should talk about Thanksgiving and maybe animal rights and delicious gravy
Oh,
or lack
oh, okay,
thereof.
sure.
Just an
Let's do
idea.
it. Let's give
Um,
thanks. Let's
let's
give
leave
other
any
things.
indigenous peoples alone if and not bother them.
Yes,
That's always a good thing
indigenous
to know.
people
Yeah,
and turkeys. Leave them alone.
I will,
Leave
even
the.
if you're
They're not doing
delicious.
nothing to you. They're not doing
Right.
nothing to you.
We
We
can
should
talk about how
mention this now because we now otherwise we'll do it after Thanksgiving. You fucks, you're listening. I
don't
guess
eat
I'm
those.
just playing up to that kind of caricature of an animal rights person, but
Yeah, make
it's true. You should leave the turkeys alone.
onion gravy, mushroom gravy, delicious
Yeah,
options. Go for
yeah.
that.
Lots of options. Lots of
We can
options.
talk about how creepy the pardoning of the turkeys is for a president to do on several
Super
levels.
creepy. But if you're on the fence, get that tofurkey to the side. They're actually better than you think. I let my mom, who loves eating meat and turkey, eat some every Thanksgiving, and she enjoys even the tofurkey. I swear. I'll bring her on the goddamn podcast and tell you guys. I swear.
On that note, goodbye, everyone.